Yeah, thank you so much, Ayaz. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Thanks so much for the invitation. When Ayaz sent me the invitation, of course, I was like super ecstatic, and I could never say no. And Obviously, when we talk about women empowerment leadership, especially in the STEM space, that's something near and dear to my heart. I think I forgot to mention one of kind of and my main role here. I think the whole surgery and entrepreneurship thing is something I do on the side, but my role is being the executive assistant of two young toddlers, a 2-year-old and a 3-month old. So whenever I'm not assuming those duties, I'm trying to do whatever surgery stuff and entrepreneurship stuff I can do. But yeah, my oldest is a girl, and obviously I take this serious, and just kind of making sure that I make a dent in this world in a way that she sees herself in many of the executive roles, and basically remove any of the limits that unfortunately exist in our community, especially where I come from Libya, a society where unfortunately it's thought with misogyny and oftentimes mixed with this misinterpretation of religion. So thank you for having me in your space. And again, I don't know what I gave the title Inventor. I think it's a big world. I think I'm one, and definitely they're not going to share any wisdom here. It's just going to be learnings and lessons, and plenty of failures that hopefully you don't fall in as well. Um, so yeah, so I think my story is like when I usually start it, the first thing I remember is just kind of I think it was the spring of 2015 as I was walking through Boston Commons. I had just arrived to the US a night before, and I was passing through Boston Common, this kind of amazing public park, which is the first in the US. And I've heard so much about how beautiful it is, but it was too dark for me to kind of witness that beauty. It was about 4 a.m. and I was just rushing to the hospital to make it to my first day, as I was accepted to this prestigious fellowship at the Mass General Hospital, which was one of the Harvard Medical School institutions, which I didn't know until I arrived at the hospital, with a big banner that says the #1 hospital in the US. And they obviously had that title for 2 years in a row. So for me, I had rushed to make sure I make a first impression. I actually spent the night before just ironing my white coat back home in Libya. A white crisp coat was a sign of a good doctor. So I want to make sure to make that best impression. I was actually coming from a small medical school in Libya. It was not Benghazi, it's not Tripoli, it was from Al Khumis. So I was actually the fifth class to graduate. And actually the whole medical school was a nursing facility that was turned into medical school. So our morgue was a kitchen, and it was just and I always get the question, how did you go from that and go to Harvard Medical School, which is a total different story. So as I entered this surgical department, I sat, and there's something in surgery where they call the surgical rounds, and it happens every morning, where basically you have all the medical staff briefed about the cases for that day. I remember sitting, making sure I don't wrinkle my white coat, and as I sat there, I the doctors and many of the medical staff started to come in. And it's not just the surgeons, right? I was doing this surgical rotation, but it was the endocrinologist, it was the nephrologist, it was the nutritionist, the pharmacologist, all coming in. And that morning, the senior fellow was discussing the case, which was an elderly man who just had undergone a dual transplant. So he had a kidney transplant to treat his renal failure, but also had a pancreas transplant to treat his diabetic condition, which has caused the renal failure. So he was treated from both renal failure and diabetes in one surgery. And as we were sitting there, we were discussing, because the surgical procedure was an absolute success, but the patient had trouble recovering. And I sat kind of in this room surrounded by all this kind of incredible medical staff and knowledge and careful deliberation. And I've heard a lot about multidisciplinary approach. how you have multi-specialties kind of discussing one case, but that's the first time I've seen it in action. And after careful deliberation, they reached the conclusion there was nothing further that could have been done. The patient is getting the best treatment that science can afford at that moment in time. There was even some experimental medicine and novel treatments that are even kind of administered. So the discussion ended. There was other few cases that were discussed, and then everybody left. And I just froze in my seat, because this was the first time through my path in medicine, through more than 7 years of medical school, different cases, practicing a bit in Libya, that I've came across a situation where there's nothing more that could be done. So you have to see, so back home in Libya, there's always something missing. There's always a medication that you could have given for the patient not to lose their life, or a specialist, if they were there, they would give the right consultation for us to save someone's life or prevent them from losing a limb or losing a certain function. There was a device that malfunctioned, if we can just bring it. So there's always missing. So for me to sit here and witness this exceptional medical system function, I knew it was not just about me coming here into the US and training as a physician. I knew it was a system. I knew if I would have trained to become this excellent physician or surgeon and gone back home, I would not be able to do anything, because it's not just a one man or one woman show. I would be like one of my friends, I think medical colleagues once explained it. It would be as if you have the key, but back home there would not be a lock. You would know what to do, but you can't do it. So I wanted to start with this story because one thing that we usually talk about in the entrepreneurial space is ideas and where does an idea come from, and coming up with good ideas. And for me, that's when the spark came, right? I actually, after a few years after that, I left medicine. I don't really practice surgery anymore now, and I started kind of slowly to focus more on kind of the work that we're doing with Speetar and more in the digital space. Because to be honest, you can't do surgery by day, entrepreneurship by night. At the end of the day, in Arabic we say ما جعل الله لامرئ من قلبين في جوفه. Like, you don't have two hearts. You only have one heart that you can give to something. And I struggle with this a lot, but it was just, I knew that I would not be treating one patient, I would be treating the system. And if I would enable a way for many of the doctors, the medical brain drain that just didn't happen in Libya, but all over the continent, especially in African and low resource settings, if we can enable a system where we can reverse that medical brain drain via telemedicine, where we connect patients in low resource settings to the physicians in the diaspora and provide that cultural and language match, that's what I would be most kind of suited for. So through my connections and working with colleagues at Harvard and MIT, we built Speetar's technology, which is telemedicine, back when telemedicine was kind of a foreign concept. I remember like explaining to people how you can actually talk to a physician. That was in 2016. And now obviously people take it for granted. As I mentioned, we started with Libya because, again, when you talk about the idea, when you talk about your customers, you need to have proximity. You can't be sitting in the US or sitting in, I think many of you today from Athens, you can't be sitting there and saying, oh, I'm going to solve a problem for, I don't know, Kenya, or sitting in Kenya and solving a problem for Chad, or like you have that proximity. And for me, I was still in the US, but I understood that community. I was born and raised in Libya. I went to med school there. I just left in 2015, so I understood the whole system, right? And I was just there because I was gaining the skills of building technology. And actually, I frequently go back and forth from Libya. I was there the past 3 months. So having proximity is very important when you're solving a problem. This could be geographic proximity. This could be proximity because you had gone through that experiment. For example, if it's a certain, even if it's in the field of entertainment, you have to have lived that pain, or someone close to you have to have lived it for you to really be able to act on it. And I've seen, and I'm sure you have read and come across many of the great ideas and products which are coming from coming from those pain points, right? It's very rare for someone to create something brilliant and say, hey, I just stumbled on it, right? So this is a very important concept. So I think that's just a way to kind of get us into kind of how to think about the idea and how to find the pain point that you can solve. To add to that, it's very important to be obsessed about the problem, not the solution, not the product. Don't think about, oh, I created this application, now I'm just going to shove it down the throat of people and they're going to use it. That doesn't happen. You have to really be obsessed about the problem, regardless if your solution is going to be the way to solve it or not, because it may be actually, it may solve it completely or solve it in a way or not totally, but you're still going to be obsessed about the problem. Many times you see with many of these startups that fail is people have a product and they're just trying to shove it and there's no fit and they just spend so much money and it doesn't work right. So always be obsessed with the problem, be flexible about the solution, be flexible about the approach, because it could be a digital solution. It could be something that requires a physical product. Maybe it doesn't require a product at all. It's just a service they need to provide. Maybe it's a service that's already exists that you need to connect it. So just focus always on the problem and be obsessed with the problem. So that's the idea basically. And for me, that's kind of more or less the easy part, right? Because you have the pain point, you understand some way to solve it. What's difficult is implementing a solution, because that's where many people fail. It's implementing, it's building the product, building the team around it, building the company, if you may say. And people don't really come. So for me, I'm a medicine. I don't like many of the, like I was going over yesterday with our team over like sales and finance and marketing and pitching and like doing offline. That's foreign concept. Like I don't know any of this. I'm just reading and researching all the time. I try to take these degrees, but obviously there's so much you can learn. But it doesn't matter, right? You gain that skill, and what's important is you surround yourself with people who know more than you. If you are the person that knows everything in the room and you're trying to lecture people, that means you're not doing it right. Everybody in the room has to be smarter than you. Your role is to connect people together and make sure they work and no conflict happens. That's your role as a, I would say, quote unquote founder, or I don't know, someone who came up with an idea. But it's not your responsibility to be the superhero who's going to do everything, do the bulk, and that's where, and just micromanage, right? As we talk about implementation, it's very important to think about the pillars, the 3 Ps of any organization or any implementation process. The first is the product, which is the most obvious. You have a problem, you need to solve it, so you're gonna develop a product, and the product could be a physical product or a digital product. The second is the process and how you go about solving that product. And what are the processes around it, how you're going to develop the sales, how they're going to do the business model, how you're going to bring customers. So there's different processes. So the product is going to be always a product. It's going to be a standalone until you basically take it to people and market it and communicate around it and change it. The third P is the people. And what I mean by people here is your team, is the people, as I mentioned, that you surround yourself with, the people who you're going to champion. Because a lot of like building startups and entrepreneurship, whatever, I think not just entrepreneurship, like in life in general, it's about motivation and showing people a vision and rallying them and building the right team. And again, it's hard and difficult, and then people sometimes get it wrong. Sometimes people get overprotective over the ideas. Sometimes people get over secretive. I think when you have an idea, just shout it out loud. I think nothing that you could think about that people have not thought about before. But what happens usually, and I come from these communities, right, where you have an idea, no one's going to tell anybody. No, because they're going to steal. Nobody's going to steal. No, an idea is worthless. Like that's what people like fail to understand. It's worthless. You can just publish it online. If you go online, you'll find so many lists of ideas that are just waiting for people to execute. They'll feel like startup ideas. You'll find like 50. Go take any of them, and that's going to be your idea, because it's worthless. Idea is worthless until it's executed. And that's when an execution is hard. Not everybody can execute. So again, when you have an idea, just shout out loud. I remember like when we first thought about this concept, crazy concept, I did like a slide deck. I remember I recorded a video. I would talk about it all the time. I'll be this crazy surgeon or physician and just wearing my lab coat. When I was in the masjid, I will talk about it. When I'll be like in the dining room, talk about it. Because, and eventually the person who ended up my co-founder and CTO is someone who was connected through someone else I met at this, I don't know, event in the masjid. So he know this person, who know that person. I shared, and I found someone, it's like, oh, I know someone who's also, he's a software developer, is also interested in impact and in healthcare. And so that person just came and we met at MGH. I remember I was just finishing surgeries. We had kind of the hospital dinner, and I showed him my slide deck, and he said, I'm gonna let's do this. And that would never happen if I had not talked about it. And I was talking and pitching, and there was nothing. I just had a slide deck back then, and I was thinking maybe I'll do white labeling, maybe I'll bring people. And I really didn't want to build a product. I was just hoping for someone to like basically give us a product to basically scale it in Libya. And I was obsessed about solving the problem I've seen in Libya, because back home, what I've seen is terrible. Actually, I have a picture that I always keep on my desk here and share. I don't know if you can see this here, but this is, and I usually share this a lot, and I have it all the time with me, a row of ambulance cars, bumper to bumper, lined in front of a gate. When I show it to many of my medical friends and abroad, they think this is some kind of hospital or medical facility. But this is actually the Libyan-Tunisian borders. And these are patients who couldn't find care within their own country. Unfortunately, this picture was actually taken before the war, before the conflict, before COVID. So you can even imagine like what's the scene now. So when I was treating patients back home, the question is always, okay, doctor, when is my situation going to be good enough for me to travel abroad for care? When is, and it's crazy for someone to be worried about a visa, about their passport, getting ambulance every time they get sick. It's crazy. It's people don't need to leave their countries, leave their cities to get the care they need. And that was my obsession. Seeing that both as a family member who had my father, my grandma, even myself travel for care abroad, but also as a physician and seeing the trouble that my patients had to go through. So again, having the idea, the pain point, building the team around it, thinking about the 3 Ps, the product, the process, the people. Think of it as a table with 3 legs. So there's some tables that have 4 legs. So when you remove a leg, it will be still standing. But if you think of a table with 3 legs, you remove a leg and it just falls, right? So you can't really compromise on anything. You can't compromise on the product and the quality and how good it is. You can't compromise on the processes and making sure that you have SOPs, standard operation procedures for everything. How to hire, how to onboard people, how to bring customers, how to respond to concerns, but also the people, making sure to bring people that are best, that will add to you, not drain you. People who could help you build a positive culture, a high performance culture, a team that is diverse. One thing that we managed to do in Libya is we have over 55% women leaders. We have women in tech. We had the people actually who are leading our product are women in Libya. And it was hard to find that talent, but we were intentional about it. We have about 5 members from the south in Sabha, in Ghat. We have about 6 members from Benghazi. We have from Misrata, we have from Tripoli. And again, we were intentional about that because we knew to build a team that will serve the whole country, it had to reflect the whole country. And it's the same thing when you're thinking about the world, when you think about the region, you have to make sure that whoever is building that product is not someone abroad building for a community inside the country, or someone within a certain segment or a certain gender or certain geography solving for another geography. You have to make sure that it represents them because it shows in your product and your service. It even shows when we have sometimes customer agents replying to people and they say, oh, actually yesterday someone replied with an accent from Benghazi, which is different from an accent from Tripoli, for example, and they see that kind of wholesome approach. And it's just not a bunch of people like in a certain region serving for others. And that has been one of our kind of power aspects that really helped us scale and grow. We have a team of over 40 just in Libya. Overall, we have 60 members with the development team in Pakistan. Myself and our developers are based in CTO are based in California. We have a team in Jordan and in Egypt and now in Sudan as we start to scale to other regions. One thing I also want to mention with regards to the process is the importance of communication. Communication is key. How you communicate internally, but how you communicate externally. It's very important, and I think it's one of the things that it gets overlooked with all the technical aspects, and I think it's one of the rarest commodities, being able to communicate clearly, concisely, with empathy, but also without wasting your time with meetings. There was actually a system that we innovated in Speetar, and again, it goes back to the processes, right? It's not just about the product. We came up with a system called Anba, which in Arabic translates, Anba means akhbar or news, right? So it's ANBA. And basically we tell, when we have meetings, give me your Anba, or give me your news. And the first A is an abbreviation of accomplishments. What did you accomplish over a week or a certain time period? So we go and reflect on that, and then that's great. The second is, what are the next steps, the end? What is the next step? What are you going to do next? What do you need? The B is blockers. Do you have any blockers that we can help you with, or you're struggling with? And finally, the A is asks. Do you have any asks for us as a team, as an individual? And we found that this really saved time in terms of just, sometimes, unfortunately, communication could be a time drag if it's not really structured. What we do is, if we're a team of 5, we have stand-up meetings, and each of us just shares their Amba, and that's done. And they take 5 minutes, and we're done. And sometimes we even do it in a text format on Slack. So again, process is very important. And again, it's not about, because what I'm saying is, it's not about coming up with ideas, it's making sure that you have the systems in place to execute that. There is lots of talk about prototyping and how to come with the first version, and what's good enough to launch and so on. What I want to say, and I don't know who quoted this, but make sure to launch fast and launch cheap. If you can do it with $100, do it with $100. If you can do it with the Notion format and product, do it. If you like, we have many of the products. When we first started, we just had a Google sheet where we collect people's information, what they needed, and we connected them, and we just send them back. Don't think it's overcomplicated. Don't think that your product needs to coding and sophisticated and UI. Make sure, because nobody cares. If you solve a problem, there's so many applications out there that the user interface sucks. Like, I don't know if we have here in US Craigslist. I don't know if you guys use it or it sucks. Like like, I don't know how people, but it's like incredible in terms of like the traction and traffic. It's just because it's a listing service. I have something to sell. I added there, I put a picture, and people just connect, and nobody can. It's not even an application. It's nothing. It's just a website, and it existed for decades, like with the same status. And there's so many other applications like that. So don't think about it being fancy, because what you're doing here is deceiving yourself, thinking that the UI and the beauty of it and all that is what actually the product, but it's not. It's just you're adding paint on a product that may not be functional. Make sure to really kind of focus on the core. What is the MVP, the minimum viable product? And that could be sometimes a survey, that could be sometimes just a phone call, or even a WhatsApp group, a Facebook page or WhatsApp group. I know many e-commerce products, for example, in Latin America, some of my fellow friends at MIT started, it's just a WhatsApp group. People just list whatever they need to sell, you have buyers, and that proves the concept. That proves that there is a need for you to start. And then once you launch fast and launch cheap, you start to learn, because that's when learning happens. The longer you stay on your desk, on your computer, in your garage, in your room, in your basement, tinkering and building the product, the longer you are, or the further you are from getting real feedback from the users. And this is what you ultimately, because what you're doing is building according to assumptions. And this is something we failed at in the beginning. We spent so much time, because me as a physician and going through this, I assumed there's so many things that people would just take on and grab, but it didn't happen. When we launched Speetar, the first version, it sucked. Nobody liked it, and there were so many things. We thought that people would like a health record, it didn't. We thought that the telemedicine component was very important. No, they just needed to have a listing of the doctors, and they can even connect with them over WhatsApp. So they just needed to know where the doctors are. So that took us so much time, because we thought that we needed an actual and final product. So make sure always to launch quickly, and make sure to just one thing that we now successfully did is we have a WhatsApp group, which is a user focus group, both a WhatsApp group for patients or for consumers of the service, but also a group for physicians. And anything we do, we send it to this group. Like I have a 20 group of Speetar enthusiasts, like, hey, we're trying this new feature. Do you like it? No, we don't. So we throw it. Hey, we're trying this new, even in communication. Hey, we're sending out this new ad. You think it resonates? People like it. Okay, let's launch it. People say, I think it's confusing. I don't understand. What do you mean by here? It's like, okay, let's scrap it. We're trying this, like even the small things, because this is the most valuable. If you can get like a group of loyal users or enthusiasts, in the beginning, these could be your family members. This is invaluable, because now you're getting real fab. You're not really living in your own bubble, thinking that you have the most perfect solution in the world. So getting real fab feedback as fast as possible is very important. And sometimes, and you have to strike a balance, right? Because there was a quote which I don't think is said by Henry Ford, but it's usually attributed to him, where he says, if I would ask people what they want, they would say we needed a faster horse. And obviously he invented the car, right? Because sometimes you have the vision, maybe sometimes because of your skill, what you've researched, what you've learned. I'm sure nobody would have imagined or would have asked Mark Zuckerberg for Facebook. Obviously they had MySpace back then. So obviously he had saw something that they didn't see. So still there is some vision aspect to it. There's still some kind of craziness to it. Maybe if things are too obvious, maybe they're not crazy enough, and maybe you're not thinking big enough. So, but there is a balance. You don't want to be too crazy that you come up with a solution that nobody's going to use, right? So make sure, again, that's where it comes back to your obsession about the problem. Because as long as you're tackling a core and fundamental need, the solution will always be a great fit. But if you, because people tend to come up with these fantasies about, oh, I think people would like this, but they don't. So it's very important to make sure that you're tackling an actual need. Some products create a need that people didn't know even existed, which again is a very I think second level school of thought. I think you guys maybe talked a lot about business canvas and kind of I think it's 9 key concepts or domains there. I can't remember them all. I remember we did it once for a pitch competition, and then it didn't matter anymore. But this is also very important, right? Before it was like always important to have a business plan. Like it's always like you have a business plan, like 10 pages, and you have to do. And it's, for me, like I see that as when you learn a language and people tell you need to learn the vocabulary and the grammar and all that, and you just get bored and you hate the language before even practicing it. Now the school of thought is, if you want to learn, I don't know, English, just go outside and speak to people. Like learn a few building blocks in language and go speak. Because as you interact with people, you get that hit, you get that satisfaction, that like endorphins, and then that will make you want to learn more. And that's how now successful language acquisition happens. So this is very important to keep in mind. So it's same with business, right? You don't want to bore yourself with business plans, canvas, and it gets really mind-boggling, because some people like take it really academically. But there is some valid concepts there, like in terms of who's your target consumer, what's the competition like, what are the channels that you're going to market, understanding core concepts about the partnerships, and so on. So for us, again, the business canvas, I think we just did it once for a pitch competition or something, but it didn't really add much in terms of the value. However, there's a new concept that we innovated, right, which is product plus. So whenever we go into a new market, now we're scaling into we were scaling to Yemen, Egypt. We just started last year in Jordan. This year we scaled in Tunisia, and our team is actually starting to kind of do some groundwork in Kenya. So we are growing, and there's an incredible avenue for growth for the specific services that we provide, and we have seven product portfolios. When we say product plus, what does that mean? So the product is the product, right? You need to have a product when you go into a new market. But then there is the plus, which is basically an acronym for PLS. P is partnerships. So whenever you go into a new market, or even maybe that's your new market, so you have to think about partnerships. Who are you going to partner? Who's going to be your champion? on the ground, or who's going to help you basically scale your solution with regulations. For example, any solution now has its regulations. For example, if it's fintech, in our case, it's healthcare. If it's e-commerce, there's always regulation that you need to consider. So you need to have partnerships in terms of regulations. Partnership also acts as a way to get funding, because certain partnerships, for example, in our case, working with UNDP, with other entities, helps you with that funding. So always think about your partners. L is leadership. You need to make sure to have within your organization, but also as you scale on the ground, you have proper leadership, because leadership, especially local leadership, is again one of the things that are underrated, and it's very important for that proximity. I think especially within many of the contexts that I've worked in, there's always this kind of white savior notion that, many of the big startups come from abroad, they come from the West, and we can't do anything of value. And that's something which for me, my personal mission is to disapprove, right? And to show that you can actually launch a successful regional and global startup from Libya. And I really get excited. It's similar to story when people ask me, how did you go from Al Khumis with small school to Harvard? It's a similar way, and how do you build something like in Libya? I think of Libya as this incredible launch pad, because as a market is very small, like 6 million, you can't really build a big company out of that. Even if you capture the whole market, even if every single person downloads the application and use it, which is never the case, it's still small to sustain growth. So leadership in terms of your market is very important. And finally, S, which is very important, again, within the context that we work in, is with regards to safety and security. And again, because many of the contexts that we work in are unfortunately within a conflict background or context, there's a crucial importance with regards to data security, making sure that the people that are trusting us with their data, we are taking that in consideration. There's so many cases, and I think it's well documented, about digital exploitation, where you have startups going into the global south, providing services, harvesting the data, and no one knows where that data is stored or how is it being used. So we're making make sure that everything is encrypted, that we're kind of abiding by all the ethical laws, even if there's no regulations within Libya. We are coming and helping. Actually, we are helping the health ministry in Libya create the first national telemedicine policy or digital health policy. And that's, as an innovator, as someone who's disrupting the system, you have the leverage. I think Uber, for example, helped create that kind of ride-sharing model. Facebook and many social media platforms are helping kind of create this new regulation around social media and what can it do and what it cannot do. And many of the countries, I'm assuming, that you are operating on will still have a nascent regulatory environment that will need your help and your support to design. So for us, safety and security, but also safety is physical safety, because many times in the healthcare space, we want to make sure that what we're providing is not causing any harm. And that's kind of the oath that we take upon ourselves as physicians, right? First, do no harm. But also because we provide services in Sabha, which is in the deep south in Ghat, and one of the services that Speetar recently launched was home care service. So we actually send people, or physicians, nurses, and physiotherapists to people's homes, and in these incredibly remote areas. And we have incredible testimonies about like an old lady in the fourth floor who her daughter could not take her down, and we managed to bring her a doctor, and he's checking on her and placing a catheter and all that. We have these incredible stories. But again, there is a security element, because many of these areas are still unstable. So we had to kind of carefully navigate and find the ways where we can work within that security uncertainty situation. So for us, plus is very important, making sure that the product is customized, is tailored to that community, but also making sure we have the right partnerships, the leadership, and taking safety and security top of mind. I think I've talked a lot, so I'll stop there. And if we have time, I'm happy